Welcome to Making IT Work, Deep Creek Center's blog for IT professionals committed to using best practices to provide exceptional value for their business clients.
So, for the purposes of our blog that we're going to be working on the next several blog posts, one of the things that we want to dig into are some of the unique issues associated with managing complex problems. And here I'm using the term complex in the Cynefin way of thinking about it. So, this requires a systems view. And all of the systems inherent in complex problems are inherently interdependent. They encompass many combinations of people, practices and processes, technologies, cultural constraints, and all work systems in complex situations produce the results that they are optimized for right now. Right? So these systems work to produce the outcome you're currently getting. If you don't like the outcome, understand that the outcome is the most optimized result of the existing system as it necessarily works together. If we don't like what we're getting, now the question becomes, what are the most likely areas that we could start to identify potential changes to that system in a way where the system itself will then optimize around a better result, given the nature of what it is that we're trying to do. So notice that we're not trying to change the system or fundamentally retransform how the system works, but to be able to work in a way to help the system find its way to better outcomes that we might like better. So one of the things I'm working on right now for my own personal development is I'm actually taking a learning program from a group called the Acumen Academy that focus on various aspects of social justice work and how to have more efficacy in your social justice action behaviors. And so one of the courses that they're offering that I eagerly signed up for was a course run by Rob Rosigliano of the Omidyar Group on systems practice and applying systems thinking in the broader context of social justice work and social improvements. Within this, he introduces a mindset approach to think about how we think about complex problems and how we prepare ourselves for working and engaging in these in a way to help produce better quality outcomes. Right? The first of the key mindset changes he asks people to think through is that the goal of any type of systems improvement is just that, to improve the health of the system and the quality of the outcomes that it produces. Ultimately, there is no mission accomplished. There is no done that we're ever going to be able to achieve related to these particular systems. What we want to be able to do is to help the systems naturally produce an outcome that we like better. In order to get to that, we want to focus not just on inherently observable problems in the system, but specific recurring patterns of behavior. How certain things replicate themselves over and over and over again in the system, what may lie underneath those patterns, and then how well or impactful those patterns are in helping the system achieve its outcomes, and what types of approaches we might take to look at solving or improving how that particular system works. He talks about the necessity of bringing an adaptive approach to the problem, and you'll see this in the Cynefin model as well, right? That in a complex situation, we want to experiment. We want to try to understand enough about the system to try to figure out where we might want to experiment or which types of experiments might be the most fruitful for us. But at the end of the day, whatever our plan is for what we think we're going to accomplish in the system better be adaptive. In other words, it's not going to work out the way that we think it's going to. And so, similar to what you've learned from listening to blog posts about other types of agile mindsets here, right? We want to begin with a clear understanding that we simply don't know everything. And so part of the adaptive approach in working in systems is, as we learn more about problems, as we learn more about potential solutions to problems, we're going to change our minds about what we need to focus on, or where or how we might prioritize or reprioritize efforts to try to help the system come to a healthier version of itself. And the last piece that he highlights, I think, is actually extremely critical. We often think of imposing changes on systems to try to force better results, right? And as we know, for anyone who's ever done organizational change management work, if we don't have the buy-in and commitment of our people, there will be almost immediate natural resistance, and people can more or less, break anything that they don't want to make happen. So it's not healthy to try to impose change on a system. Systems, by their very nature, however, are inherently able and willing to change themselves. And for example, most of the times, if you're working in a complex system and you see parts of that system that are inherently ineffective or unhelpful, you may have very keen insight on specific ways we could unlock changes in parts of the system that might inherently improve the overall outcomes of the system. And so part of the opportunity here, again, is surfacing improvements where they exist, right? You can see how this has worked out in the context of organizations experimenting with different parts of adopting DevOps practices, for example, right? So if an organization wants to engage in a DevOps journey, in many shops, this becomes a conversation about tooling and automation of flows, right? More broadly, though, if you look at things like the State of DevOps reports, they've identified through hundreds and hundreds of organizations wrestling these demons, different types of patterns that they see that may then drive organizations to be more successful at the journey. So, based on effectively the nature of the complex system, we're working our way towards something that might be somewhat more complicated, where it becomes a little bit more predictable and where certain types of good practices may emerge. So the State of DevOps practice in, I think, 2019 introduced certain steps in your journey you should think through. How do you simplify the number of production platforms? How do you then take those minimal number of platforms and be able to establish infrastructure as code capabilities for them so you can spin up production-like environments to improve the quality of your testing and validation activities? How might you then go and start trying to drive improvements in your automated testing and automated configuration controls so that you can actually maintain your baselines? And of course, you can continue to follow these over time as you're doing your own organizational experiments. But the intent here is, rather than imposing certain types of changes on the system, unlock them by creating or freeing up certain constraints to the system that enable flow to occur more efficiently and enable feedback to happen in a more organic way. This, in turn, should help the system start to produce outcomes that we like better.
Thank you for joining us today. Deep Creek Center provides consulting and training for businesses around the world. For more information, visit deepcreekcenter.com.